For an interviewing as a DP, I think people forget that it's just not just a technical visual art form. So I think like too rigid lighting leads to too rigid acting. I started as a PA and worked my way up. Really, I went to film school at Humber College, and then I met a producer really quickly after film school that got me out on a bunch of music videos and some commercials. And through that, I met some gaffers and some key grips that I was just very keen learner and very keen to learn. So I would ask them if I can come out for free and help them grip or light stuff. I was more interested in lighting, but I sort of worked on different crews while I was PAing, and then eventually I just started working as an electric full time. But in the meantime, I was always shooting indie films and short films and documentaries throughout that entire period. So from when I graduated from 2003, I think, from Humber, I was shooting stuff while I was PAing, while I was electricing, and building my reel. So at some point, I just didn't want to electric anymore. I just found it, I didn't like it. So I just said to myself I was going to stop at a certain date, and I did. And it was a rough year for financially. But eventually, I started getting hired as a DP more often, and people started to recognize me as a DP. So I just started full-time into DPing around 25, 26 years old or something like that. But yeah, so I started shooting in documentary first. And that led to commercials, and that led to, because I started doing documentary style commercials at first. So very hyper visual commercials, and that led to more scripted stuff, and that led to, yada, 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 and it all kind of, came down to where I am now. Yeah, like I still find, like, if I, even at this point in my career, if I find the right spec commercial or short film or even feature film, it's all kind of similar in that if I connect to something, I'll do it for no money. Not that like that's what I'm aiming to do, but I think it's important to move your career forward or evolve in some way. And if that means I need to experiment on something for free, that means if I get a project that I want to try new gear, try new crew, try whatever, a comedy instead of a drama or a drama instead of a comedy, I think the best thing to do is something that's doesn't have a lot of pressure. So you can experiment. And so I'm always looking for spec stuff just to make my reel a little bit more interesting. And this one video that we did, it was total spec, so I called in my favors with actors, with gear, with post-production. And at that time I had lots of favors to call in, so I went with a camera, an actor, and went to like a farm for a weekend and just shot completely unscripted visuals with this person and the director as well. So me, the director, and the actor, and then the designer, and that's it. It was a tiny little crew. And that commercial got me nominated for a CSC award. I don't know, I think I won that year, actually. That's the one I won for. The one, maybe two. But yeah, that's the one I won. I won that, and then sort of agents started to peek their heads up a little bit. My name was getting around a little bit more, but all because it was a total spec spot. But the spec spots also allow you this freedom to like experiment, try new things. And I think for that specific project, the 18 Weights project that's all it was just total experimentation with lenses, with types of camera, with frame rates, with light, with, and it just ended up, it's like a minute-long commercial that ended up really visually interesting. And that's what sort of really started my career forward, is that one project. The thing I learned to do is make sure people know I'm around, because when you go away for 3, 4, 5 months at a time and you come back, everyone assumes you're just gone and they don't know when you're back. So just to say, hey, I'm around again, just so you know. So that's a lot of like emailing, texting, like, shamelessly saying like I'm around if you need me, that kind of stuff. But I mean, a lot of times your gut reaction is to not shamelessly do like self-promote, but you need to in that sense, because people will forget that you're around or just not know you're around, and so you need to kind of remind them. If I were to talk to myself as a younger DP, I would say do more of it. The only problem I find with, like oversaturating yourself is that you look desperate, and I've never felt, I've always stayed on that line of not putting myself out there too much on purpose. It's very calculated as far as how much I put myself out there and how much I ask for work and how much, because I find as much as like younger Rob did a lot of that stuff and it eventually worked for me, I still find it's like I don't love doing it. I'm still not comfortable with it. But I am fortunate enough to have people respond to a lot of my reaching out and to say, come meet me for a coffee or give me advice or something on my first bigger project. Like I've been very lucky in that for sure. So I would recommend a younger self to do what I did and not be so shy. And because part of our job is to promote ourselves. Like that's part of our life, and you just kind of got to get used to it. Unfortunately, I hate it, but it's necessary, At some point of everyone's career path, there's always stumbles, and I think I had a 2-year stumble where I signed with an agency that I shouldn't have, and they just didn't get me anywhere, and that's my own fault for hoping that it would go well. I guess they didn't talk to me enough to know what I wanted to do in 5 years from now, for example. So I think I regret. I was sort of a DP that was kind of up and coming, and I was getting nominated for stuff, and then I left one agency, went to another agency, and that's when things kind of stopped, almost dead, like dead. And not that it's not my fault too for not trying to, reach out to people and find my own work. But I think having a team that has the same goals in mind as you do, and making sure that goal stays the same, is very important. Like, because when you're on a path and you kind of veer off the path, it's nice to have someone behind you, like an agent that's saying, no, remember we wanted to do this, so maybe you should do this project instead. And I think it's really important for young DPs if they want to go down the agency route, and you just make sure that they have your back, like your team has your back, because I think I went off the track because my team didn't have my back, in my opinion. Agencies, like your agent can only push you so far, like they can get you in a room or they can put you on a list, but it's really up to you and your work to get the next step. You know what I mean? So I think like that's why I'm always doing spec stuff and always, shooting, just trying to build my reel bigger and more versatile, because then I can get into more rooms, and then my agent has reason to get me into more rooms. And I think it's all really dependent on where you're at in your career. I think how much an agency can do for you. Like, I mean, I think every single project I've ever done, there's a little bit of fake it till you make it. Every single job I've ever done, I have a the day before we start shooting, there's always a moment where I'm like, they're gonna find out I'm a fake. I have that same exact thought every single project. Commercial doesn't, I mean, depending on the commercial, but every big project has that same like, oh, they're gonna find out, man. But I think if you're not scared, I think that's almost the same a problem a little bit too. Like to be too complacent is also an issue. So I think a little bit of nervousness keeps your back up, keeps your eyes open, keeps you sort of keeps your mind engaged, Well, because like you're creating something from nothing. So okay, so you go into, like, as an artist, which we're technical artists, but we're artists, and we go into a project, and we have to someone has an idea in their brain, and it's up to us to make it, to get that out into the real world, to have that pressure of, okay, if this isn't exactly what they want, I'm gonna feel disappointment, I'm gonna be disappointed in myself. So it's the it's the imposter syndrome comes from just the pressure of trying to make sure that you do the story justice. And you don't know until you start going that you can. At least that's how I feel. I can talk all I want. It's really like in my mind, I'm like, I don't know if I can do any of this. And I think I wouldn't put myself up for projects that I was just like completely, like not ready for. But when you go into something, there's always a chance, that it won't go as planned, or the showrunner or the director, it doesn't look like they wanted to. And so that's always in the back of your mind of like, I just wanted them to be happy. I want to make sure that this is like exactly what they want. So there's always imposter syndrome always creeps in just for the sake of like, you're creating something from nothing. And I think that's like a really scary thing, like for any artist. So like it's just the pressure of making something from nothing is like terrifying. I mean, I like to over prep. I'm an over prepper. I like to do like lighting maps and have a good sense of as to what the shots will be the day or 2 or 3 or 5 before. So I always have a backup plan. I look at my lighting plans as backup plans only because I'd like to get to set and watch the actors move around the set before I place any light at all. So I think for me, blocking is the most important thing about what I do. I don't like to box myself in with lighting. I don't like to box actors in with lighting. So I like to witness the blocking, witness how the actor feels the character should move around the scene, and then start lighting the scene. Because if you're too rigid about your lighting, actors will feel rigid about their acting. If you tell them that you have to hit this mark because the lighting's perfect, then actors are only gonna think about hitting that mark and not think about what their character's feeling. So I think like too rigid lighting leads to too rigid acting, and I think the two combined are so important. Like my thing is when I go into a set, once we see the blocking and I light it, there obviously is parts of the set that are better lit than others, obviously. So what I usually tell the actors is, this is your zone right here. This is the best lighting for your zone. You can go out of your zone anytime you want. Just so you know, as an actor, and your best lighting, because I don't want you to get mad at me if you're out of your good lighting and you're into some darkness or something. I just want you to know this 6x6 box is your best zone. I'm not giving them a 1x1 box. I'm not even giving them marks half the time. That's why my focus pullers need to be really good, because I don't love giving marks to actors. I'll give them a box. And sometimes obviously when it's like a push in or something, you need to hit it, or whatever. There's specific times where you need specific marks. But in general, the stuff that I do, I like it to be a bit more loose and ready for changes. Like even you could do take one. You light a whole scene, you do take one, and then the actor wants to do something else because it's not working. Fine, that's cool. You need to be open to that kind of stuff. I think when you're too rigid lighting and you're too rigid in your plans, I think things really get stale. I mean, there's the opposite version of this, where the Coen brothers are storyboarded and they know exactly the shots and whatever. But even on their sets, there is room for actors to do things that they want to do to get better performance. It's always about performance, and I think how I like to look at it is that I'm only there to serve the actors, and the actors, if they want to move around and I need to change my whole lighting setup, then I will do that. I don't get mad at that. I'm there for them. Our whole job is to make actors look good, or the project sucks. Like if the actors are bad, the project's bad. It doesn't matter how good something looks. If the actors aren't doing their best work, the project suffers completely. Yeah, that everything shouldn't be perfect, because life isn't perfect, and you don't go into a restaurant and everything's lit perfectly. You don't go into an office and everything's lit perfectly. There should be room for error even in your lighting and your setups. And I think at that point too, it's easier to understand emotionally when something is beautiful, why it's beautiful. If everything's beautiful, it gets lost in the beauty rather than the emotional arc. you get lost in the beauty of a shot, and you start to think about how amazing that shot is or amazing the lighting is, and you forget about what you're supposed to be watching as the character going through something. If you don't try to make everything perfect, then when the emotional arc gets to a point in which it should look beautiful, that it will stand out a whole lot more emotionally and visually than if every single frame is perfect and every single frame is beautiful. Allowing the beauty to stand out from, everything should still look good. Save that very specific beauty for specific moments. And I think that's a really important thing, to not always search for beauty in every scene, because not every scene should be beautiful. Every scene should only follow the emotional arc of the scene, rather than serving your own purpose of like, well, it's my job to make it look good, so it's gotta look good. I think you have to sort of let that go a little bit and allow for the beauty to rise to the top when it's appropriate. As you're sort of going up up the ladder in your career, you're gonna be put into rooms where nobody knows you. And so you have to convince them that you are the person for the job, that they can trust you, that you're gonna give them the look they want, you're gonna be fun or whatever to work with, all those things in one interview. And I think people don't really talk about DPs interviewing, and I think it's important to know that I'm decent at it. I feel comfortable in those rooms, because I know I talk a lot about story in those interviews. I talk about visuals eventually. We'll get to the visuals eventually, but to me it's always story. So I'll have questions for the showrunner or the director or the writer. I'll usually do like a lookbook of like, here's what I think it's gonna look like. But then that comes later. For me, it's always about story. If I can prove to them I can tell their story by understanding their story, I think that's really important. And then obviously, there has to be some connection as far as just personalities go. That's just human nature. So I think for an interviewing as a DP, I think people forget that it's not just a technical visual art form. It is storytelling as much as it is a lame term. It is storytelling, and I think you need to understand that as a writer, as a director, as a showrunner, all these people care about the story first. You are the only one that cares about the visuals first. You're the only one. So if you go into this meeting and you think that the visuals are number one in their minds, you're wrong. And so you have to go in and you have to pitch yourself as pitch your visual ideas according to story only. Not to make some beautiful thing, but it has to be all relate back to the story. To me, like, an interview is based on story. Talk about story first, and then we'll figure out what it looks like.